Hey, Patrick, great to meet you. You wrote you had some questions, so I wanted to set this meeting up so we could get those answered.
Okay, first off, you do have the ISO 27001 privacy firewall certification, correct?
That's a good question. I'll have to get my guys on that. I think we do.
Great, because we'd really like to see a few use cases, and by few I mean as many as you can show us, on how people use Proposify in the exact same way we do.
The exact same way?
Let's move on to integrations. We use Crayfish, we use Peeler. You can integrate with those, correct?
I know, I'm sure I can look those up and it'll be...
This is a must. We need to make sure our users can only see 2% of the start of the sales cycle 25% of the time bi-quarterly.
Why do you need that? What is that for?
We need a lot of things to be successful, Bobby.
My name is John. Everything's gonna be okay. I'm just gonna get a nice steak dinner.
Jim.
I'm gonna cancel the deposit on the pool.
Can I just set it up all on my own?
Everything's gonna be cool, Johnny boy. I'm gonna get CSM on this call.
Welcome to the Closing Intelligence Show. Every episode, we'll walk through one of our experiments to shorten our sales cycles, drive up deal value, and close more deals. We'll show what worked and what didn't, so you can apply these learnings to your own sales team.
We were getting a lot of complaints from our customer success team about customers not necessarily knowing what they had bought, having misaligned expectations around what our product was capable of. We'd often have to get into kickoff calls and resell customers on what they had bought. A lot of that came back to our sales team not necessarily having a deep understanding of what we did to implement Proposify with new customers, and not really being able to answer some of the deeper questions that needed to happen during the sales process.
A lot of times I'd get on these calls and they'd have all these questions about the product, and I really wouldn't have the answer most of the time because I wasn't the product expert. So then afterwards I would always have to say, let me get back to you, and then sort of figure out who should I go to. A lot of times I would end up asking one of our account executives, but then they were either busy or told me to ask someone else a question, and then sometimes it would take days even to get back to the prospect.
Our sales team was getting frustrated as well because they weren't getting a ton of positive feedback from the CS team, to the point that our sales reps didn't really feel comfortable bringing CSMs onto calls with them because they weren't sure that our alignment was going to be there and that we were actually going to get a positive benefit from bringing more team members onto the calls.
There were definitely times where we brought people in from CS onto calls. From our perspective as sales, we want kind of a quick response of yes or no if we can do something, but things would be a little bit elaborate, and there's definitely been situations where if people aren't used to talking to clients, they can get a little bit nervous and kind of overshare information that might not be relevant. So definitely a few frustrations with that.
Before Pods, I was working with every salesperson, and every deal could be a little bit different, and it made it a bit more difficult to actually onboard and have the clients be successful on the platform.
What the teams had noticed there is that two different communication cultures had sprung up. Problem is that once you're inside a culture, you can't see that you are there. So when two different cultures try talking to each other, they're both trying their best, but they're talking two different languages and talking past each other.
Because prospects didn't feel confident in our expertise, it was starting to affect our numbers, especially in larger deals.
So my job as the revenue operations manager is to stay close to the numbers, track where our metrics are going so we can get a bigger picture of how we're performing, and I can give recommendations to improve our performance. One metric we realized that we needed to work on was our average deal value. The deals under $15,000, we had a really great close rate above 30%. Once we got over that, our close rate dropped to about 4%, and over $20,000, we just weren't able to close those deals. So we knew we needed to do something.
In March, Connor announced the change to the two departments.
Building teams is hard when you're in person, and when we went remote, it got even more difficult for us to build bridges amongst our sales and our customer teams. We knew that we needed to do something intentional to create that collaboration. The solution for us there was Pods. We thought that if we created a framework that forced people into collaborative settings, that would give them the opportunity to build the bridges that they know that they needed anyways, but didn't necessarily know how to build. And for us to actually solve some of the core problems that were at the root of this instead of just putting a Band-Aid on it.
I was honestly a bit nervous when the pods first started because, I wasn't sure if it was going to interrupt with my flow.
There's a lot of psychological tricks playing into this. Let me break down some of the bigger ones. Connor wasn't aware of doing it, but what he actually started was an equal status contact, as we call it in psychology, which is one of the better working strategies to shift people from us versus them to all of us versus the shared task.
So the first thing that we did was we asked everyone, if you had the option to be paired with another person on this other team, who would you choose? We knew that that wasn't going to be enough to make a really great pairing, so we also did a psychographic analysis.
The pods were brought together based on science. We did it based on science.
Personality by the Big Five model and motivation styles were the two factors I looked at. Important to me was that we didn't just build teams that get along, but also that we can build a sustainable culture of communication and motivation.
Why didn't you use Myers-Briggs?
Myers-Briggs? Well, if you want a BuzzFeed level of reliability on your personality test, you could go for it, but I prefer not doing horoscopes.
So the first thing that we did to help foster some collaboration and just bring the teams together is we put the task out for them to come up with their own names. So 3 names that we ended up coming up with were Pied Pod, Raiders of the Lost ARR, and our team favorite, Cash Holes.
Giving your new group a name is just another trick here to shift your social identity towards, this is my group. To make it very simple, we kind of evolved to think in villages and hunting groups, and that hunting group being so much smaller makes it easier to actually relate to them, even if we put in the CS and the sales village members together in it.
But there were still challenges to overcome.
So one of the roadblocks we ran into very early on in the pods was trying to figure out how to bring technical resources onto calls. So we have a Salesforce implementation specialist named Mitch, who we started bringing onto Salesforce deals to help us understand and answer technical questions at a higher clip.
I guess the question here is, can we make it so the proposals do not push back into the opportunities on Salesforce?
100%. By default, without that connection set up, there's no possible way for that to even take place. Essentially, when using the app, by default will not assign it, especially if that connection is not there, if that integration isn't configured. We then would allow it, obviously, but that's a manual thing that someone has to go about doing.
So I just wanted a yes or a no as a response.
Right.
I don't know if that response cleared it up.
Right. No. It's like you can, but it doesn't by default.
Yeah.
So you could. It's just very
technical.
Clear.
It's very technical because obviously I don't understand how things work from a sales perspective. I just want to know is it possible? Yes. Yeah. Can we say yes or no?
What we found is that because Mitch is so smart and so technical, he would use these conversations as an opportunity to really showcase all of his technical understanding and all of our technical capabilities, to the point that prospects would get confused, or they might even start to lose faith in what our product is able to do, because Mitch is quite well versed in what it's not able to do. So we had to really get specific around why we were bringing technical resources onto calls, the role that they would play on the call, and at what level it made sense to go down into the weeds.
Yeah, CS people can get a little bit into the weeds.
Getting into the more technical things on those calls was really fun for me. I got to answer the technical questions that the client was looking for, and it really helped them understand what they were paying for. It was a lot of fun.
One of the early points of friction that we had to overcome was that our account executives weren't used to hearing all of the wonderful things that happen behind the scenes, from workarounds to hacks to make our products successful with our companies. So we had to get them comfortable with seeing, how the sausage was made in the early days, and that definitely took a little bit of time, because you don't want people who are selling your product to have lower confidence in its ability to impact change. And when you see how the sausage is made, you can start to have questions about whether or not you want to sell that sausage. I don't know if that's good.
So, what were the results? Did implementing a pod structure and involving customer success in sales help move the numbers?
Revenue is an output metric that anybody can look at, but you need a leading indicator. So one that we looked at was sales velocity. So sales velocity is when you take your number of deals, the average deal value, and your close rate, and divide that by your average sales cycle to get your velocity. So when we rolled out the pods in May, at the time our lead velocity was around $1,000. Immediately we saw that number start to go up within a month or two. And then after about 6 months of having the pods in place, that number actually went up to $3,000. So we essentially 3x'd our sales velocity in just under 6 months. And when we looked at our deals over 15,000, we actually got the win rate up on those deals, which brought our ACV significantly up. Even though our sales cycle was a bit longer, it was okay because historically, we would have really long sales cycles on these larger deals and not close them.
So aside from all the great collaboration and team building that pods provided for us, they were also incredibly effective at helping us drive more revenue from the same size sales team. Our sales team cost the same last year as it did this year, and yet we've driven 300% more new business this year because of the pods. A great example of why we're winning more deals and winning larger deals is related to Microsoft Dynamics. So we never used to win deals when customers or prospects were using Microsoft Dynamics. We didn't have a native integration for it. We didn't know how to even speak to it on sales calls. We're now at the point in our evolution where we're custom coding connections to Microsoft Dynamics in real time on customer demos to show them how we can bring their data into Proposify. We're winning deals against our competitors that have native integrations, and we're ultimately finding more success with larger customers because we have a better understanding of their business before we close the deal.
Now when I get onto these qualification calls and the prospects have questions about the product that I don't necessarily have the answer to, I know exactly who to go to get those answers, and I can usually get a quick turnaround within that day. And also it helps when I'm name dropping members from our pod to get them looped in on the conversation, whether that's Jasper, Luke, Nick, or Nick, and they'll help them get onboarded as fast as possible.
That frustration that CS had for us selling maybe not great deals is gone because they're going to be involved in the cycles. So we have a better understanding of who is a good technical fit. It also gives the clients a good peace of mind because they're meeting some of the people they'll be working with when they come on board.
When we started bringing in our CS reps onto calls, that was when we noticed our close rate on those calls go up to 67%. So it was a no-brainer to keep bringing reps on the CS team onto our calls.
So one of the great things we've seen from this change is that the relationships between our account executives and our CSMs across the board have improved. And that's allowing us, again, to move deals through the pipeline faster. Our velocity from a sales standpoint has really cranked up. And we just have happier team members that feel more empowered day to day.
So should you implement a pod structure? Like most things in business and in life, it depends. If you decide to try it out, here are a few recommendations from our team.
The first is starting small. So we started pairing customer success managers with customer success reps to just provide better support to the accounts that we were managing. When we saw success there, we felt like we had a model that we could bring to our sales team to pitch them on the idea of bringing the two groups together. It's important to also think about your business and your go-to-market motion. So when you're creating pods, there's some easy ways to slice and dice most companies. You can arrange your pods around geographies, industry verticals you're selling into, the different products that your company might sell. But when you roll pods out, don't just do it for everything. Be intentional about the strategy behind why you're rolling pods out so that the people that are in those pods have a goal that they can associate with the pod. You don't want it to just be a general pod for everything. You want intent behind those pods.
We hope you enjoyed the first episode of The Closing Show. You can help the channel make more content by liking and subscribing to Proposify on YouTube. Leave a comment and let us know what you'd like to see in a future episode.
Kyle! This guy was mean!
I'm still here, Bob.